All right, so this is another devlog for Reading Room VR, a VR app that adds to the ambiance of reading physical books in the real world. Basically lets you take a physical book off the shelf, open it in front of you with a VR headset on, and it'll match the scene, the lighting, the soundscape, everything around you in that experience to what it is you're reading, so you can stay in flow state, stay lost in the story, and really just be immersed in what you're reading. The last video I put out wasn't really a devlog, although it kind of was, because it was the culmination of a lot of effort trying to finally get Passthrough working in Godot, which was something Godot didn't really have support for until recently. With that video out, that means Passthrough works. So there was a couple of things that I was able to accomplish rather quickly. I did a bunch of refactoring, pulled a bunch of code into a couple of different places. In fact, you'll even notice that the old table and video display are missing. And that's because I've moved them into a different place, but we'll get to that in a moment. I still have the app getting set up as normal, so a lot of XR setup. And then I do have initializing a pass-through. So right now in the main script, my main.gd, I do have the basic setup for the pass-through. But that's really all it does is it sets a feed. It's putting it right now in game state. So game state's still keeping track of everything that's kind of important that's shared everywhere. And that includes the some signals here for whether or not the feed's been started, whether or not we have an image captured, but also really the main feed and a camera texture are the two things it keeps track of. So initializing that in the main loop, and then right now I have a call delayed to start and stop the camera. That's because it seems like if you leave the feed running forever, after about 60 seconds to 90 seconds, it'll crash the app. So not sure why that is. I assume it's just a bug that Meta has to resolve, but we'll get to that eventually. And right now, start and stop camera, just all it does is turn the feed off and turn it on again, which is a little annoying because you get a little pop-up every time it starts the camera. But again, I'll live with it for now until we can find a better, more appropriate fix later. But one thing it does do then is, in theory then, every so often, it'll just take a still image from the camera, do OCR on it, and display it. Now, the one issue I ran into very quickly was that the OCR quality wasn't that good, which, in hindsight makes a lot of sense since we're grabbing a still image from a video feed. And if you've ever worked with that before, you'll know, taking a picture with a camera, you get this beautiful, gorgeous image. But if you ever take a video feed and try to grab a still from it, you always end up with this kind of blurring artifacts and these other things going on. So I wasn't too surprised to see that, and it doesn't seem like the camera has a way of just grabbing still images directly. But either way, one of the first things I did was turn off that infinite loop of constantly trying to OCR images. And then I refactored all the debug stuff into a different scene that gets loaded in dynamically now. So we have this setup debugging, which gets called onReady for the main script. And it checks to see if we're a debug build. So if it's a production build, we don't do this, we skip it, because again, debug panel shouldn't be needed otherwise. But if we are debugging, if it is a debug build, if it's me testing, then I go grab that scene, load it in, and add it underneath the camera, anchor it to the camera that's off of the XR origin. I now then have basically this debug panel that is anchored to my view. So no matter where I look, I'm going to end up with both a version of the book in front of me, so there's a second copy of the book there that I can still pick up and grab. I've got the video feed in the upper left, and I've got a still image frame in the upper right, which is black right now. The old red button to trigger OCR, that has been moved. Let me get a book in front of me. And so now, let's go zoom in on this page. I've moved that old red button to above my head. And so if I press it with my hand going up in the sky, it'll take a still image at that moment, run OCR on it. We can see in the lower corner there, and actually here's the results. So it says down here, a Business Week bestseller. So it got that with all new examples from something, something. Yeah, so there's still some mistakes made. And then when I'm done with getting that image, I now have a new script that I added where I can go grab files off of the device. So I'll run that right now. It pulls the files off and then deletes them, purges them off the device. And then, of course, the final step I still have is I'll just uninstall Reading Room from the device, which kicks it out. And then that's just that quick loop where 3 quick little commands I can run in order to speed up my testing. So if we go look at the debug HUD, and again, we look in 3D, really all we have here is that button and those screens. But if we look at the script for it, on detector toggled, which is hitting that button that was there before, I go and get the image. I create an image texture from that image. I then set that on the display, but then also create a current timestamp. And right now I'm experimenting with writing a bunch of different image formats. It looks like EXR is not available. I think that's missing. Maybe there's like a flag I need to set for my Godot build to have that available. It did write a DDS file, but that didn't quite work. And then also when it's done OCRing, it'll write the XML Hawker results. If we look at the results of that, so you can see here is a picture I took of a open page version of that book. If I zoom in, we can see that, some things are pretty clear, but other things, you get this kind of tearing, this like image tearing that's occurring. And again, I think that's because of grabbing a still image from a video feed. And I think if the camera was moving at all, in this case, I had the VR headset set up on my desk right in front of the book. Nothing was moving. Everything was perfect. But I think if anything was moving at all, this might even be even worse. And then you can see there's certain words here that are just not readable at all. Now, one of the things you can do, so even though this is a 1280 by 960 image size, it still has a lot to be desired. It doesn't look as clean and crisp as the other images I was working with before, the ones that I had just taken from my phone camera. Now, one of the things Tesseract lets you do, so I can run Tesseract from the command line. And one of the things that it lets you do is if you pass this test edit write images flag, it'll write out an image that kind of shows you what Tesseract is going to run OCR on after it does some initial pre-processing. So it tries to do some binarization. It does some other tricks that it does in order to improve the image. I think the main thing being binarization, which is everything becomes black and white. Everything's that would be grayscale based on a threshold of grayscale, either goes to white or it goes to black. You can see at the bottom we've lost a bunch of things down there. But then if we zoom in a bit, again, we can see there are certain words that are pretty readable, right? And we would expect that maybe those would OCR pretty well. But especially on this page, you can see there are whole words here that can't make heads or tails of. And, in theory, a computer, an OCR library might be smart enough to read a word where you or I might struggle to understand what it's seeing. But that doesn't seem to be the case because the results I'm getting are actually pretty bad. So, what do we do? I think at this point now, I'm able to pull a bunch of images, actually, yeah. So here's that folder where we've written to that I've pulled down off the VR headset. We've got a couple of different images. I've got the pre-processed TIFF here. I don't have it here in this folder, but I also have the Hawker results as XML. And so I think what I need to do now is go spend a bit of time, probably with OpenCV, and see if I can clean up these images on my own. So can I do some pre-processing on this? Maybe do object detection to detect the book and then pre-crop the image based on the bounds of the book, or maybe detect the text region so that we preemptively already have this as a box, which means when we do binarization on it, instead of certain the things that are the darkest of darks and the lightest of lights will be different than a standard image. Get a little bit more control there. See if I can do some de-skewing, de-warping as well. And then, possible, I don't know, but we do have both cameras, right? So we have the left camera and the right camera from the headset. There may be a way of grabbing a still image from both at the same time and then merging those together to get a higher quality image. I'm not sure. Either way, the goal is going to be to do some OpenCV, see if I can improve the quality of OCR, at least get it above 90%, where only 1 out of every 10 words is broken, which, obviously I would want the quality quite a bit higher, but let's just start there. Not worry about speed or performance of Tesseract, just quality only. And if I can get that working, running OpenCV locally, and if there's truly positive results there and things are looking good, then I'll probably have to pull the band-aid of getting OpenCV in C++ in my GD extension as part of my data pipeline for when I'm OCRing images. But for now, let's just get started on OpenCV and see where that leads us.
One eternity later.
Okay, so here we are a couple weeks later. I kind of wish I'd cut this video off over 2 weeks ago as I went down a deep rabbit hole of OpenCV. But I did accomplish quite a bit. So for these high quality images, like starting with a high quality just off the phone image, I started prototyping code in Python with OpenCV, got an environment running there, and got that working pretty well. In fact, got above 95% quality of OCR for an image like this. And so I was able to detect the text, put a bounding box around it, including detecting things like page numbers, and then crop down to just that, do some de-warp, de-skewing, some better binarization algorithms, and actually, getting above 95% quality. But then, I tried applying the same thing to the lower quality video still images pulling off the VR headset, and that's where things broke down. So kind of running into the classic data science problem of garbage in, garbage out. If the data coming in is bad, then it doesn't matter how much processing you do, you're going to probably end up with bad results coming out the other end. So with that, I had to turn my eye towards, can I get better images off the VR headset? And so for that, I ended up preemptively moving off of Python with Tesseract and OpenCV and getting this working in C++, which again meant trying to get OpenCV installed in C++, which meant running into all the same problems I've run into before with installing libraries. In fact, with OpenCV, it's even more complicated because apparently the libraries and dependencies you need for Android are different from Windows for C++. And so I ended up running down a double issue there of trying to get it installed. But ultimately I did, and started pulling multiple images off of the VR headset and trying to do things like merging those images together. I've had some mixed results there. I think it's going well, but more work is needed. And so I think at this point, I kind of need to just cut this video off and spend a bit more time on that code, which is very much a work in progress. But I think in the next video, it's going to be less of a devlog and more of a deep dive on just OpenCV and how to apply it to video still images, as specifically still images coming off of the MetaQuest VR headset. And so make that less of a devlog and more of a deep dive like that previous video I did on the Passthrough camera. And so with that, I think we'll stop here, and hopefully in the next video, I'll have some real positive results to share. If you'd like to follow the project more closely, I stream at least twice per week to both Twitch and YouTube, where you can see me get deeper into the technical problems that I'm solving as I'm solving them. And I'll see you in the next one.